White House policy change, how the Biden administration is redefining gender and access to health care. Violence in the Holy Land, what Pope Francis is saying about the clash in Jerusalem. Nuclear weapons, how South Korea wants to work with the U.S. to disarm North Korea. And China matters, what you should know about the communist country and its growing influence. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, May 10th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight, the Biden administration says laws that forbid sex discrimination in healthcare also protect gay and transgender people. That is a reversal of a Trump-era policy. The Department of Health and Human Services said today everyone, quote, should be able to access healthcare free from discrimination. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. It's complicated and, of course, very controversial, but it all boils down to this. Going forward, if hospitals or medical providers violate those federal laws regarding sex discrimination in health care, they risk big sanctions.
Starting now, the Health and Human Services Office for Civil Rights will investigate complaints of sex discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and so-called gender identity.
You cannot discriminate against people based on sexual orientation or gender identity.
But Luke Goodrich from the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty argues against the policy, writing, it will punish doctors and hospitals if they won't perform harmful gender transition procedures against their conscience and medical judgment. This is bad for patients, doctors, and religious liberty.
Also tonight, here comes the money. President Joe Biden announcing today from the White House that cities and states across the country, including right here in Washington, D.C., can start lining up for their share of $350 billion.
Today, we're opening a portal for state and local governments to apply for the first funds from the American Rescue Plan.
Critics argued the money was a bailout for poorly run governments.
I have an update for you on the Colonial Pipeline.
And in the press briefing room today, top national security officials discussed the latest on that cyber extortion attempt on a vital U.S. fuel pipeline, the Colonial Pipeline hit by a ransomware attack.
Colonial is currently working with its private cybersecurity consultants to assess potential damage and to determine when it is safe to bring the pipeline back online.
The FBI blamed the attack on a criminal gang known as DarkSide. There are concerns that supplies of gasoline, jet fuel, and diesel could be disrupted.
And on a side note tonight, but certainly a symbolic one, across the street from the White House is Lafayette Square. And guess what? It is back open for the first time in nearly a year. It had been shut down because of all the protests. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
A fire of undetermined origin gutted a vacant Catholic church in Philadelphia yesterday. Listed as one of the city's historic buildings, St. Leo the Great Church was built back in 1884. Consolidations closed the Tacony Parish in 2013, leaving the building empty since 2019. Only its walls and steeple tower still stand. Many are remembering St. Leo's vibrant years. Well, Arizona's Catholic bishops hail a new law to permit pastoral visits at hospitals. Many faithful lost spiritual counsel and sacramental care during the COVID-19 pandemic. Hospitals must now accommodate clergy who adhere to proper precautions. Virtual visits must also be facilitated. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says extremists will not destabilize Jerusalem.
אנו עדים לתקופה ממושכת, יציבה ופתוחה, שבה אנו פועלים.
The Prime Minister told a memorial service that Israel's government is committed to freedom of worship for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Yesterday, Pope Francis warned that violence begets violence and asked for the Holy City to be a place of prayer and peace. Clashes between Palestinians and Israeli police have injured dozens. Hamas has also launched rockets into Jerusalem. Settlement issues are stoking violence. A Saturday bombing at a girls' school in Kabul has killed 50, mostly teen students, wounding more than 100. Rival Muslim factions are at odds, struggling for dominance. Afghanistan's Taliban has announced a 3-day ceasefire for this week's holiday. Well, ethnic tensions and violence are tearing at Christian unity in Ethiopia. The head of Ethiopia's Orthodox Church is calling the government's actions in Tigray a genocide. The government blames Tigray's leaders for 6 months of attacks, which have killed hundreds. The U.S. ambassador to Ethiopia met with the patriarch today to discuss his warning. Well, ahead of his visit with Pope Francis in Rome, Argentina's President Alberto Fernandez has arrived in Portugal. It is the first leg of his European tour, where he met with President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa. The next stops are Spain and France before heading on to Italy. While South Korea's president is looking forward to a summit with President Biden on May 21st.
긴 숙고의 시간도 이제 끝나고 있습니다. 행동으로 옮길 때가 되었습니다.
President Moon Jae-in welcomes a Biden administration plan to end nuclear weapons on the Korean peninsula. He wants diplomacy restored among the two Koreas and the U.S. China is defending its handling of a rocket booster that burned up over the Indian Ocean. Beijing says it is being unfairly held to a different standard from other space programs. The communist country is accused of acting recklessly in allowing its rocket to fall to Earth seemingly uncontrolled after bringing a space station to orbit. Joining us now is Gordon Chang, author of both The Coming Collapse of China and The Great U.S.-China Tech War. Gordon, welcome back. Always great to have you on. As we just mentioned, Beijing says it's being held to a different standard. Gordon, is that the case? And also, what does its seeming disregard to meet standards in handling space debris, what does that signal?
Well, first of all, China is not being held to a different standard. No country since about 1990, except for China, has launched a booster and planned an uncontrolled descent back into Earth. And last year, actually, a China Long March 5B, the same rocket that we came back to Earth on Sunday, actually hit a building in the Ivory Coast. This is just reckless. Countries that launch these days plan to have controlled returns to Earth. China does not.
I want to go back to something that we mentioned just a little earlier, the Biden administration's attempts for diplomacy with North and South Korea. I'd like to get your thoughts on those plans, and also, how does China factor in?
Well, the Biden administration at the end of April announced a new North Korea policy, but they really didn't give us very much in the way of details. All they said was that they weren't going to go back to President Obama's strategic patience, and they weren't going to do Trump-style diplomacy. Moon Jae-in, the South Korean president, wants really the United States to agree to a removal of sanctions on North Korea prior to North Korea doing anything in return. The Trump administration wouldn't do that, and that was the correct posture. I actually don't think Biden is going to do that either. So this is going to be some tension between Moon Jae-in and President Biden.
And as you know, late last week, Hong Kong pro-democracy advocate Joshua Wong was sentenced to more time in jail for his role in a vigil marking the anniversary of the 1989 Tiananmen Square crackdown. Can you talk a little bit more about this development for us?
Yeah, Joshua Wong got about 13 months. Also, Jimmy Lai, who is the publisher of Hong Kong's only major pro-democracy paper, got 14 months recently. Really what Beijing is doing with its new national security law is trying to lock up every democracy leader, including Joshua Wong. So this is going to be a continuing story as they develop new cases against these individuals. And the United States needs to do something because Beijing's been very clear it's never going to let these people walk free again.
And Gordon, I want to touch on this before we let you go. You know, you and I had talked about the potential origins of COVID-19 before, but now it looks like Republicans are starting to put some pressure on the Biden administration about what our government really knows about it, and also the relationship between the NIH and the lab in Wuhan and what is being called the gain-of-function research. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, Dr. Fauci's Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases actually issued a grant, which was used from all we can see for gain-of-function experiments in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Gain-of-function is essentially biological weapons research, and this is not permitted in the U.S. So it was really wrong for us to fund this offshore. Right now it does look like this disease actually came from the Wuhan Institute. And it actually even looks like this was a re-engineered bug rather than just the release of a natural pathogen. So there's a lot of questions that Dr. Fauci is going to have to answer. And the U.S. should continue to press for this. And people in the U.S. should press the Biden administration to release what it knows, because they know quite a lot, I think, at the State Department. They're just not telling us.
And Gordon, before I let you go, we have probably about 30 seconds or so left. What else are you keeping your eye on in regards to China?
Well, Taiwan, because of the increasing pressure with the flights into Taiwan's air defense identification zone and the circumnavigation of the Chinese Navy, this is going to be a continuing story that we've got to look very closely at, because we're not deterring Beijing.
Well, Gordon, thanks so much for your time. Always great to get your analysis. Gordon Chang, author of both The Coming Collapse of China and The Great U.S.-China Tech War. Thanks again.
Thanks, Tracy.
Coming up, communion concerns, how one archbishop thinks the church should approach Catholic politicians, and path to sainthood. Learn about the judge who Pope St. John Paul II called a martyr. Earlier this month, the head of the Archdiocese of San Francisco wrote a letter saying pro-abortion politicians who are Catholic should not present themselves for Holy Communion. And now one Catholic lawmaker is responding.
I do think the church needs to stand up against folks who are hypocritically claiming on the one hand to be believing in the Bible and Catholic, but on the other hand are engaging in activities that are directly contrary to serious moral teachings of the Catholic Church.
Representative Alex Mooney is one lawmaker who says that he'd like the discussion to continue in homilies during Mass. Although Archbishop Cordileone never mentioned House Speaker Nancy Pelosi by name, she represents San Francisco, is Catholic, and has voted for pro-abortion legislation. EWTN News Nightly reached out to Speaker Pelosi for comment. However, we did not receive an answer. Joining us now is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone, head of the Archdiocese of San Francisco. Your Excellency, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us why you felt compelled to write this letter and what has been the response so far.
I've known for some time I had to speak out on this issue. It's been vexing us for a very long time, and now I'm here in San Francisco. So I needed to find some way to express the teaching on this. So I got the idea to issue this teaching document because I've realized for a long time the problem is too many Catholics don't understand what it means to receive Holy Communion, and we see this in the polls. I mean, the drop in belief in the real presence coincides with the drop of understanding what it means to receive communion. It's not just a matter of table fellowship, which is the Protestant understanding, but it's we unite our sacrifice with that of Christ, and we die with Christ by dying to sin. So receiving communion, one must be in a state of grace, accept the teachings of the church, believe what the church believes, and live it accordingly. If one commits a mortal sin, if one is out of the state of grace, we're blessed with the sacrament of reconciliation, so one can be, once again, properly disposed. So I had to teach about that. I had to teach about the evil of abortion itself, because there's so much deflection as to what really goes on with that. And I had to teach about how these principles of cooperation as well, and the special role that Catholics in public life have. So I've known for a long time I had to do something. So I was working on this basically all last year on this document.
Yeah, and as we just mentioned, there are some on Capitol Hill who agree with you and really support you on this. Have you heard personally from any lawmakers either in California or Washington?
No, I have not heard from any lawmakers.
Well, I won't be surprised if you do anytime soon, for sure. I know that Bishop Robert McElroy from the Diocese of San Diego has publicly disagreed with your stance. He said in part, quote, communion is being weaponized and deployed as a tool in political warfare. I'd like to get your thoughts on those comments.
First of all, to say this is being done for political motives is to presume to read the minds of those who are taking the stand that it's for a political reason that it's being done. So the same argument could be made in reverse, that those who are opposed to applying the church's discipline are doing so for political motives. In reality, an argument can be made for both that are not politically motivated. I intentionally did not publish this letter until after the election, specifically so that no one would misunderstand it as being a political ploy. And there was also precedent for this. No, we're applying church teaching. And if we look back to the last century, the primary preeminent issue of the day in the mid-20th century was the civil rights movement. And we have a number of examples. The most famous was Archbishop Rummel actually excommunicated 3 Catholics who were prominent in political life in his archdiocese in New Orleans because they opposed his plan to integrate the schools there. So, I mean, and no one accuses him of having weaponized the Eucharist. So it's a matter of applying the church discipline to protect the sacrament, to move people to conversion. I do not have a political motive for doing this. I would rather a pro-abortion politician become a pro-life politician than be replaced by one who is pro-life, because we expand the pool of those who are pro-life in public life. So my purpose is not to sway votes. My purpose is to save souls.
We have probably less than a minute left, and you sort of touched on this before, but I want to bring it up again. What impact, if any, do you think your letter will have, and what impact do you hope it will have?
It seems to be gaining a lot of attention and calling attention to the very serious evil of abortion, that this is not like any other issue. This is the direct killing of innocent human life. So I'm hoping it will ramp up the discussion, bring much more attention to this, and move people who are on the fence or even in favor of abortion, move them down the path of a true wholehearted embrace the goodness of human life at all stages and in all conditions.
Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone from the Archdiocese of San Francisco, thank you so much for your time. God bless you.
Thank you.
Up next, promoting Christian unity. Learn more about the proposal to synchronize calendars with Orthodox churches. The Catholic and Orthodox churches almost always celebrate Easter on different days, but there is a chance that may change. Earlier this month, the Orthodox and Eastern Rite Catholics celebrated Easter or Pascha. Those churches follow the Julian calendar and believe Easter must fall after Passover. Roman Catholics follow the Gregorian calendar. This was one of the years when Easter is several weeks apart, though in 2025 it will fall on the same day. Joining us now with more expertise on this topic is Cardinal Kurt Koch, President of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity. Your Eminence, welcome back. So good to see you. Can you briefly tell us, why do the Orthodox and Roman Catholic rites follow different liturgical calendars?
This is a very difficult question. Just in the early church, we don't have a common date of Easter. We have 2 directions. The Christians in the Asia Minor have feasted in the same time as the Jewish Pascha. And on the other side, in other regions, in Syria, Mesopotamia, the Christians have feast Easter the Sunday after the Jewish Pascha. And then the Council of Nicaea, 325, have found a solution that Easter must be feasted on the Sunday after the first spring full moon. And then we have a new situation in the 16th century, because Pope Gregory XIII had made a great calendar reform and introduced a new calendar, the so-called Gregorian calendar. Then all the churches in the West have this calendar, and the Orthodox Church have another calendar. The calendar was just introduced in the Council of Nicaea. This is the reason that we have 2 different dates.
Do you think it will ever be possible for the Universal Catholic Church and Orthodox Church to celebrate just one Easter?
We hope that we can refine the common date, but it is not easy. The Second Vatican Council of our Church has said we are open to refine the common date if all Christian communities can find the consent of a common date. But this is not easy. We have some proposals. The simplest proposal is that we take the date of 7 April as the date of the death of Jesus, and then the next Sunday we feast Easter. That means that every second Sunday in April we can feast Easter. We have other proposal. The Council of the Churches in Geneva had made a proposal that we can follow the Gregorian calendar, but the point of reference must be Jerusalem. And now we have a new proposal of the Archbishop Job Grecia, an Orthodox, Greek Orthodox Archbishop. He said, 2025, we feast the 1017th anniversary of the Concile of Nicaea, and this will be an opportunity to refine the common date on the basis of this council.
And finally, can you tell us what do the Latin Rite, Catholic, and Orthodox faiths, what do they have in common? And do you think there should be more dialogue between the two?
Yes, it's a beautiful thing and the richness that we have different rites in the Church and in the Christianity. But Easter is the most important feast of Christianity. And today we have a new situation. In the past, the different churches lived in their countries, and it was not a great problem to have her own date for Easter. Today, the Orthodox churches, the Oriental Orthodox churches, live also in the diaspora, in different countries in the Western. And then we have different dates of Easter in the same country. And this is a very great difficulty also in mixed marriages. When we have a mixed marriage between the Catholic and the Orthodox, and they have different dates. And in this sense, it's a pastoral question to refine a common date of Easter. And I think on the way to refine the unity in the Church, between East and West, it is very important to refine the common date, and we can feast together Easter.
Well, Your Eminence, thank you so much for your time today and speaking with us. We really appreciate it. Cardinal Kurt Koch, President of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity. Thank you again.
Thank you and good evening.
Pope Francis says to love like Christ means to say no to money, vanity, and power.
È il segno distintivo del vero cristiano.
Addressing pilgrims in St. Peter's Square yesterday, the Holy Father said Jesus asks us to abide in his love, and to do so, we must not focus on our needs and earthly comforts. To love means to offer yourself at the service of others. And finally tonight, a Catholic judge who was killed by the Italian mafia was beatified in Sicily yesterday. Rosario Livatino was named blessed at the Cathedral of Agrigento. Pope John Paul II called him a martyr of justice and faith. Pope Francis echoed the comments. Livatino prosecuted criminal activity of the mafia throughout the 1980s. On his way to the courthouse, the mafia shot him. He was just 37 years old. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.